Constitution Amendment. You need 2/3 of the vote in the House. We passed it in the House, passed the Senate, the governor vetoed it. It came back to the House, and we overrode that veto by 2/3. The same thing in the Senate. We spoke, and the people listened to us, we did it. And that's why it's now going to be on the ballot.
All right, final question from John Nolan, and this from Mr. Cataldo.
It seems there is more need than the state can meet with funding. Would it be worthwhile for the state to compile a regionally focused critical needs list while admitting that funding is not available to address those needs, giving the public and regional non-profit organizations an opportunity to propose solutions? How would you propose to go about compiling such a list?
Well, form a committee first and start looking at it. That's the best thing to do. And then look at the problem, see if there is a problem. But you know, you just don't go out and you say, okay, let's look at it. You form a committee. That committee needs to look at the pros and cons of the entire problem. And that's where it starts, John. Start a committee, look at the problems, find out the pros and cons. If it works out, we do it. If it doesn't work out, we don't do it. That simple. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Leonard?
Well, I have to actually agree with Sam on that, to probably get a list and figure out where we go from there, set priorities. Again, our budget is a list of our priorities. And just see what needs to be done and see what we can do and what we can't do. What we can't do, we would have to put on the wish list.
All right, our final question from Tim Kramer will be for Mr. Leonard.
Do you philosophically believe that you should vote my conscience or vote my constituents? That is, will you be making decisions based primarily on your own beliefs and values, or will you weigh your decisions based more on what your constituents favor?
I haven't faced that yet because I don't have a voting record. I will be the senator for the constituents of District 6. I will take all of their advice, their input. I will listen to experts. I will consult with members across party lines. And I'll make the best informed decision that I possibly can. I will not vote my own personal agenda. I will vote for the people of New Hampshire, because it's not just District 6 that's involved, one of 24, which represents the entire state when we make policy. So I would have to find a balance. And I know there's going to be gray issues that are going to be very, very difficult to deal with. And I pray that I'm wise enough to make the right decisions.
Mr. Cataldo?
I'm going to have to agree with Rick, and I'll tell you why. One of the problems we have, you need to understand, we have to work as a community. When you sit down and a bill comes in, and you look at my watch, she'll tell you, Sam reads the bills. And that's what you need to do. You just read the bill, you just don't read the bills. You get in there and digest it, find out what the committees are doing. When it comes to the House floor or the Senate floor, the same thing. We'll have a discussion like we do in the House, no different. The most important thing is, when you sit down and you vote, when I vote for the entire state, not just my constituents. They're involved also. But I vote for the entire state, because it doesn't just affect my constituents, it affects everybody who lives here. And that's how I vote. Thanks for the question, by the way.
All right, thank you. And it's now time to move on to the audience questions. And first question will go to Mr. Cataldo. Where do you stand on employee choice? Why do you support or not support an employee's right to not join a union or pay so-called fair share?
Very good question. Thanks for the question, by the way. In all my years, my 55 years of working, I only worked in one. I actually worked in a lot of plants that had unions. I've never worked in a union. But one of the things I have to talk about is what happened in 2010. January 27th, I got a letter from an anonymous person showing the requirements in order to get an interview here in New Hampshire. And on that piece of paper, it was actually only one sheet, by the way, it stated, right in the first paragraph, The SEIU will be the individual or the corporation that will take the money out of your paycheck. That's number one. As you continue reading down to the last paragraph, in order to have that interview, you have to sign that piece of paper, and then you can have the interview. So here you are committing yourself immediately to have to join the union before you even have an interview with the company or the state, and that's wrong. It's not called choice. It's your choice to do it, and I am for right to work. Bring the right to work in here. You as an individual and I as an individual, for 55 years, I've made my choice, and that's what you should do. If you don't want to join the union, you don't have to join the union. But this state is forcing you to do it, even before you have an interview, and that's the problem.
Mr. Lemon?
Well, we're obviously talking about the right to work legislation that keeps coming before the Senate legislature every year. Looking back over the past decades, Republican and Democratic governors alike have not been in favor of right to work, also called right to work for less. Recently, Governor John Lynch, who's been in office for 8 years and been a proponent for finding out-of-state businesses to come to New Hampshire, has stated that none of the businesses that he ever got to move to the state of New Hampshire, that the right to vote, the right to work was ever an issue for them coming or locating to the state. I'm not in favor of it. It's not an issue. It comes for a vote every year. It's a moot point.
Let me do a follow-up on that, if I may, please, give you a little story. With my background and experience, I've had project manager jobs. I've had 28 people working for me. I had women working for me. The technicians, men and women, got the same pay, and we were non-union. I don't want to hear this story about we're going to get less and so forth. They got paid the same. And by the way, my best workers were the women, by the way. And they got the best position because they did the job. And that's the key to understand. The right to work is going to bring work to the state. It's going to be equal. It gives you the opportunity to say yes or no, and that's the key. When you want to join the union or you don't want to join the union. When you're forced to join it, where is your choice? Did that man in the White House say choice is one of the things we have to have in this country? Just remember that too. Thank you very much for the question.
Just one quick comment. Recently, this proposal was defeated by a majority of moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. So it's not something that's good for New Hampshire. We don't need it. It's a solution that's looking for a problem that doesn't exist.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mr. Leonard. As you know, the current legislature imposed a new tax on our community hospitals that has cost them $250,000, resulting in several hundred layoffs of hospital personnel. Do you support reinstating these monies to our hospitals? Mr. Leonard?
Restating
Reinstating them,
yes. I really can't address reinstating taxes that have already been paid. I would have to wait and see on that. I think we definitely need to address this tax that was placed on our hospitals. Our local hospital here in Rochester is to the tune of $5 million a year, which forces them to operate on a very, very narrow margin. If it gets any slimmer, that we may actually see doctors leave the employment at Frisbee Hospital, which would ultimately become a decrease in services available to the citizens, patients here in Rochester. So I would look very closely at possibly doing away with that tax on the hospitals. It was brand new last year. It's not good for New Hampshire's hospitals. And it affects all of them except the smaller tier hospitals up in the north part of the state. I think the hospitals that are 20 beds or less, but it affects every other hospital in our state.
Mr. Cataldo?
I'm going to have to agree with Rick on this one. There's a lot of problems we have with the hospital, and I understand where it came from. My sister-in-law works in the hospital, and so does my other sister-in-law, she's a nurse. What happens here in New Hampshire, when you get the administrative people, they'll turn around and do anything, and they're doing it. They're gonna start laying people off, just to make it look bad for the legislators in New Hampshire. And understandably, that is true, by the way. So when you start threatening these people are gonna lose jobs if we took money away from them, the money was appropriated the way it was, and that's how it is in the House and the Senate, and it worked that way. No further discussion on that at all needed. The hospitals are to blame for people getting laid off, not the New Hampshire Senate or the House.
Thank you. This next question is from Mr. Cataldo. For years, there has been talk of an east-west, four-lane limited access highway to connect northern Stratford County to the Concord area. Do you support building of this highway and why?
Yes, I do. I'll tell you why. Looking back at 101, back in 1963, the federal government was building this highways. New Hampshire turned the money down. The government was paying 90% at that time for the highway to be constructed in New Hampshire. 101 was one of them. And they turned it down. And you look back at 101, there was so many accidents over the next 40 years that it was just unbelievable. But we needed to do it, and we did it. We finally built that highway, and it reduced the accidents. I don't have a problem. When I first worked, I had my restaurant in Seabrook, and I had to go to Concord. I took the old route forward. It took me about an hour and a half to get up there, but that's beside the point. There was no direct route to Concord. You've got to have direct routes. And look at the master plan back in 1962 that I saw in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New England. The roads were there, and those roads were there for transportation and means of transporting people and businesses to one another. And that's the key. So once you put that highway in, you're going to expand the jobs in Hampshire. You're going to bring more businesses in. Highways bring in business, and that's the final solution.
Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, east-west highways in New Hampshire, that's always a pleasant thought. You can go north-south, but you can't get there from here if you go east to west. I really don't have enough information to take a position on that. I would definitely be open-minded to proposals. It would make it a lot easier for me going from New Durham to Concord if there was a superhighway. But that's not the case. I think we would have to look at fixing our existing infrastructure first before we started on new projects going east-west. Maybe look at a rail system going from Massachusetts up through Manchester, Nashua, Concord area. That is a system that businesses have been saying for a long time that would really help them. So I think that would be something that would be told rather than east-west highways at this point.
Thank you. Our final audience question. Do you support allowing handguns in the State House, and if so, why?
You first.
I'm sorry, yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Leonard first.
No. Well, I have no problem with, handguns per se that are in the hands of people that have them legally, they have permits. But I really think there are areas in our society where they're just not appropriate. And it's my understanding that in 2010 in January, the very first House rule that was passed by Speaker of the House, Bill O'Brien, was that state representatives could carry weapons in the State House. I don't do that. It's not sending a good message to our kids, our citizens. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing wrong with guns. In fact, I don't have a problem with guns. But as a member of the Advisory Council for Stratford County Extension Service, which is 4-H, one of our biggest clubs, the most popular club, 4-H club, is target shooting for kids. It's great. It's a gun club in 4-H. It teaches them responsibility, teaches them safety, teaches them a new recreation. which is good for New Hampshire. 30 seconds, I can do 30 seconds. But to have people toting around guns just to prove a point in the State House is not right. And they can't take that gun across into the Senate chambers.
Mr. Cataldo?
There's a man named Paul Harvey. He needs to give you the rest of the story. I'm going to give you the rest of the story. You can always carry a gun in New Hampshire, in the State House, until 2006, when the Democrats took it out. And that's the fact. Always could carry a gun in that house. No ifs, ands, or buts. And as a representative, I carry. Sometimes, not all the time. Just like tonight, I'm not carrying tonight. Why? It's my right. It's my Second Amendment right. It's not a permit, by the way. You don't need permission. It's a license to carry, because the Constitution says we can do it. So in 2006, it took away that right from the people of New Hampshire. You can walk up in that balcony with a shotgun and not even know it, because it's your house. There are days I do carry it because it's the way it's right for me to do it. And I still do occasionally. When I do it the way I'm supposed to do it. I have the right to carry concealed, and I carry concealed and nobody sees it. And one of the most important things that Bill Bryant was, he says, you don't turn around, banish it, and show everybody you have a gun. It's not the proper way to do it. We're adults, and we know how to take care of ourselves in the New Hampshire House and the Senate. No different. But anyway, it's a bogus argument. It's always been there before. The Democrats took it out in 2006, and we put it back in 2010. End of story.
Thank you. That concludes this portion of the forum, and we're now going to move on to closing remarks. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to deliver their closing remarks, and by drawing the straws, Mr. Cataldo will go first. Mr. Cataldo?
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, by the way, being here this evening. Probably some of you might have taken something out of context. If you get to know me, I am who I am. I've been a representative for 6 years here in New Hampshire. I'm a member of the Science and Technology Energy Committee, and like I said earlier, I'm its clerk. You hear a lot and see a lot. I will continue to carry over the information I've learned for the last 2 years and the last 6 years that I've been in New Hampshire House, and bring that knowledge into the Senate. It's important to be there and to be a full-time senator. I'm retired. When you're a senator, you're going to put in 60, 70 hours a week. If you can do it, do it. And I'm the person you can go up here and count on. I will be there to do the 60, 70 hours a week. So vote for Sam. He's your man. Thank you very much.
Mr. Leonard?
He still has 4.5 minutes to go.
I'm not wrong.
Well, I just wrote something up tonight, just a little story, just to close things out. And I'll try to read it, try to just talk about it. But it starts off, several years ago, I had an idea to go skydiving. So I invited 2 of my sons, Matthew and Daniel, to join me. So off we go to skydive New England. We take the class, we signed all the waivers, and we climbed aboard the skydive plane. When we reached an altitude of almost 5 miles, it was time to jump. I was very afraid. Once I was sure that my sons had safely exited the plane, being the good dad that I am, it was my turn.
Let the kids go first.
My fear was very real. My mouth was dry, but I made the jump. I thought then I knew what fear really was. Last May, I was approached by fellow Democrats, and their call to me was, would you consider running for the New Hampshire State Senate? That fear returned. My first reaction was disbelief, then curiosity, then a week of contemplation. I said yes. Never having been involved in politics, every event since then has been like jumping out of the plane all over, crying out, speaking in public, answering questions. I have since learned that my real fear today far exceeds the fear of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. My fear is what has been happening to our state government for the past 2 years, and how quickly extreme agendas have become commonplace and common. This makes skydiving looking like child's play. But the real message is not about fear. The real message is about facing fear, overcoming it, stepping out of your box, looking at new horizons. I feel I have done that. I understand there are long days of meetings and nights of long reading, briefings ahead. I'm determined to learn what I have to learn, and I'm determined to get it done. I have a long history of getting things done. I know, as I've said earlier, there will be many gray areas to deal with and hard choices to make. I hope and pray I will make the right decisions for what's best for you and for New Hampshire. We all need to pay attention to what's been happening, to participate, and to do it. I urge you to make plans now to vote on November 6th. I thank you for your support, your attention, and I ask you for your vote. Thank you.
All right, that concludes tonight's forum. I first want to thank Eastern Propane and Oil for sponsoring tonight's event. I want to thank the candidates for attending and addressing our members, and wish them well on Election Day. And I also want to add, I appreciate the decorum we both showed here tonight. I want to thank the media panel, Tim Kremen and John Nolan. Thank the City of Rochester for their hospitality. Thank MetroCast for taping tonight's event. I want to thank the Chamber staff for organizing everything. The only thing they don't do is remind me to make sure I go back and forth, so I apologize for this. But I also want to thank all of you for coming this evening. It's a very important election. We're glad that you're here showing interest. We want to remind, not that I have to for this particular gathering here, folks that are here, but the folks at home to remember to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th. Thank you all for coming. Good night.